Well, hey there, it's Brent Adams with Inside Farm Life, and I'm back with another episode of Inside Farm Life. And this week we keep with our theme of the dairy industry, and we're talking with Pam Jahnke, who is with the Midwest Farm Report. She's been covering the dairy industry in Wisconsin for some 30 years. She brings great insights to everything going on in the dairy industry in Wisconsin. So you're going to want to give that a listen. Then we bring in a new segment called Ask the Agronomist. And this week it's Bert Riggan with Concept AgriTek, and we're talking about mitigating environmental stress, which is a big deal right now for a lot of farmers dealing with extreme drought or extreme saturation conditions. And Bert brings some great insights. Then we break down the markets this week with our buddy Jesse Allen, a lot going on in the markets. And our buddy, the hot rod farmer, Ray Bohacz, comes back with another installment of Bushels and Cents, and he wants to know, how well do you know the springs in your farm equipment? Then we take things back to the country with our True Country Music segment. This week it's Jed Melton. He's a great true traditional country artist out of Piedmont, Missouri, which is just up the road from our home office in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So you're going to want to hear that. Jed brings the heat here with his great song and a great summertime anthem there. So go check out Jed Melton. And then we've got a lot going on that you're going to want to know about. Coming up next week, we have a live stream on our Facebook page at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's Randy Roker, who is a dairy farmer out of Wisconsin, also the Farmer Angel Network founder. And that's a great organization that provides resources for mental health for farmers and ranchers, and it's something that you're going to want to check out. Randy is a very knowledgeable guy, very passionate about the dairy industry and about helping farmers, and we love his mission, and you're going to hear all about it this Wednesday on the Farm Life Facebook page for our Farm Life live stream. We've got a lot going on the podcast, getting ready to start here in a few weeks. Live streams in agriculture and country music are going to be kicking up. A new website, farmlifemedia.com, is going to be launching here in a few weeks, so stay tuned for more information on all of that. A lot of big happenings as we build to these farm shows in the fall, conventions and conferences. We're going to be giving you wall-to-wall coverage on all that stuff, and you're going to want to pay attention to everything we're doing here as we try to give you the best in coverage of true traditional country music and the agriculture industry. And you're going to hear it all on Inside Farm Life. Well, I'm going to get on out of here. We got a lot going on, as I just said here, and we got to get to it. So for now, I present to you this week's episode of Inside Farm Life.
Welcome to Inside Farm Life, your weekly connection to agriculture newsmakers, hot-button industry issues, educational features, and the best in true country music. I'm your host, Brent Adams, and I thank you for giving us some of your time. This week we'll talk dairy with the fabulous farm babe Pam Jahnke, and later we'll hear from Concept AgriTek agronomist Bert Riggan about mitigating environmental stress. We'll also hear the music of rising country star Jed Melton. But first, some news. This week, U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack outlined steps needed to protect livestock producers from unfair practices in the marketplace. USDA Radio's Gary Crawford explains.
Some lawmakers are suggesting that concentration in the food and agriculture business is more than ever putting producers in an unfair marketplace situation. Some even calling for a special investigator at USDA with subpoena powers to enforce the 100-year-old Packers and Stockyards Act, which was designed to protect producers from unfair treatment.
It's a good proposal. I think it is part of what needs to be done.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack telling a Senate Appropriations panel this week that there is a lot more that needs to be done, though.
The lines need to be very specifically strengthened and drawn so that it's clear what is an undue preference, clear what is unfair practices, clear what the scope of work ought to be, clear what competition standard we have to reach in order to be able to have enforcement. I think that's part of it. Price discovery is important.
But he says long-term, the country needs more small and mid-sized livestock and poultry processing plants to provide competition and reduce the country's reliance on a very small number of processors.
Also this week, Vilsack said the USDA is working on a return-to-work plan for many Farm Service Agency county offices.
Right now, USDA's Farm Service offices have an average of 75% of their employees actually working in the offices. The rest are working remotely. Meanwhile,
we are working on a return-to-work plan.
And Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack told a Senate panel this week,
the challenge is making sure that we're respectful of people that want to get back to work and of the customers we serve, but also respectful of the people that still have hesitancy about going back to work, and giving them sufficient time to make adjustments in their personal life, given the fact that they've had this new normal for a year where they may have not had to have child care expense and so forth and so on. So we're trying to create enough flexibility to be able to do the job and be able to be respectful of concerns.
And Vilsack emphasized that surveys show the job is being done by local offices in the same timely manner as it was before the pandemic.
And finally this week, help is on the way for struggling dairy operators. Gary Crawford has more.
During a Senate Appropriations hearing Tuesday, Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy asked Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack this question about COVID relief efforts.
Can you give me an update of when small and mid-sized dairy farmers can expect much-needed relief?
Senator, today.
Leahy said that's the first time he could remember a cabinet official saying anything would be done that day. Secretary Vilsack announcing 3 dairy relief efforts.
1, a dairy donation program that is designed to defray the cost of donated milk.
Reducing losses for farmers who make donations.
Secondly, we've increased in providing a supplemental margin coverage payment. We'll go out to small and mid-sized dairy producers under that program.
Third, there's help for smaller dairy producers who saw their milk markets and prices distorted by USDA's big cheese purchases for its food box program.
It caused a lot of harm to smaller producers.
And so Vilsack says USDA intends
to reimburse those producers for some of the loss that they incurred.
This is Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Like a championship caliber baseball team, your fungicide has to be tough, and Concept AgriTek has the solution many of America's top growers trust. BioAid is an EPA-registered fungicide that delivers an initial contact kill of a wide range of fungal pests and is safe to the user and the environment. To find out more about how BioAid can help you increase your yields and deliver a higher return on investment, visit conceptagritech.com. Concept AgriTek, technology where you need it most. Well, the U.S. dairy industry adds $753 billion each year to the U.S. economy, and our next guest is right at the epicenter of the action in the dairy state. My friend, the fabulous farm babe, Pam Jahnke, has the honor of covering the Wisconsin dairy industry for the Midwest Farm Report from her home base in Wisconsin. And Pam, welcome to Inside Farm Life.
Appreciate it, Brent. Glad to be with you.
Well, Pam, I know when we last talked at the outset of the pandemic, milk producers and consumers alike were just gobsmacked as farmers were forced to dump milk in cold dairy herds, not because of a lack of consumer demand, but because the industry got caught up in a shift from a portion of those dairy products being delivered through institutional sources to almost exclusively at-home meal preps, and the industry had to play catch-up. As we stand now, some 14 months later, has the Wisconsin dairy industry fully recovered from that tumultuous stretch?
You know, I'm not sure that I can say fully recovered, Brent, because it takes a while to really be able to evaluate that. What I can tell you is during the pandemic, everything was upended in all of agriculture, but specifically Wisconsin agriculture and our dairy industry. It was my job to try to help consumers understand they were seeing pictures of dairy farmers dumping milk at the same time that moms could not get more than a gallon of milk at the grocery store. That disconnect was really pronounced here in America's dairyland. And what it also revealed was, number one, a lot of our Wisconsin dairy farmers honestly did not know where their milk was ending up. They didn't know if it was ending up in cheese, if it was ending up in another soft product, if it was making it to the fluid lines. They had never really had that conversation with their processor to find out who the end users were, and in turn, how that supply chain had upended the situation with their co-op or their dairy partner and impacted their day-to-day milk production and shipment. So that was the first thing that it revealed. The next thing was obviously how dependent all of agriculture is on labor and our employees. And everybody obviously wanted to be extremely safe and cautious, trying to figure out exactly what the pandemic was. And that led to more slowdown. So those were really the pronounced stories we heard right from the get-go in the dairy industry. And then once we worked through things, then it was a matter of trying to figure out how many of our dairy processors were going to be able to pivot to the new market. So in Wisconsin, we are very proud of our cheese production and our cheese history. You know, specialty cheese is a major deal for us as far as Wisconsin. 48% of all specialty cheese comes from Wisconsin. But as you can imagine, that means then that our cheese producers, if they were primarily serving the restaurant and pub business, well, okay, now how are you going to repackage that to get it into grocery stores? And the other odd, these are things you only think about after it's happened. So in Wisconsin, we do a lot of in-store sampling of cheese, cheese cubes on a stick, or a toothpick, I should say. Well, you can't do that in a pandemic. So all of a sudden, our artery outreach to our consumers is cut off. Okay, how many people would be ordering or trying to find a specialty cheese tray for, whatever? It's not a takeout item. So all of a sudden, our industry partners had to really figure out, wait a minute now, what are we going to do to still reach those consumers, still get our specialty cheese, which is sometimes at a premium, into their hands. So we've worked through a lot of that. I think we've all learned a thing or two, both in our personal lives, professional lives, and otherwise, on how we can reach those consumers, how we can still enjoy those foods. And I'd say that now, probably only in the past 60 days, we're seeing more in-store sampling. Consumers are obviously heading back out to restaurants and ready to enjoy. So we are coming slowly back to what I'd call our new normal, but not after overcoming some major obstacles. And for a lot of our dairy farmers, as far as the financial line, we've gone from the upheaval in the pandemic, and now, as all farmers across the United States are facing, weather-related challenges that are escalating feed costs for many. So it seems like we're always jumping from one pot of fire to the next.
So according to the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, the state saw an unwelcome milestone over the last year when the number of licensed dairy herds slipped below 7,000. Now it's 6,774 as of June 1st. Think about this. There was a time in the state going back to the 1930s when there were 167,000 dairy farms across Wisconsin. When you talk to the remaining dairy farmers and dairy industry officials there, what are some of their lingering concerns about the state of the dairy industry?
I think that it's always one of the first conversations is about the scope. How big is too big? Are Wisconsin dairies going to end up being, more of a corporate event or something like that? And I think those are fair conversations to be having. Wisconsin's always been very, very friendly to small and medium-sized dairies. And what I always remind my audience, Brent, is you have to stop and think about what's really happening in Wisconsin's dairy industry. So today, we are seeing the average size of our dairy herds grow, where it used to be mom and pop and, 50 to 100 cows. Today in Wisconsin, basically 99% of our farms are all family owned, but it may be 4 different families that are together. Mom, maybe it's dad and brother and 2 sons. Well, to support those 4 families, you have to milk more cows. In Wisconsin, despite those numbers that you pointed out as far as how many cows and herds we've got, like you said, just a little over 6,000 herds that are here, but our cow number keeps going up. We're nearly to 1.3 million head of dairy cattle in Wisconsin. So that tells me that the farms that discontinue dairying, we don't lose the farm. They're still running the farm. The land does not leave the family, and the cows probably go to the neighbor because we've grown up with those boys or we've known them generationally. So the cows are not leaving Wisconsin. Our milk production continues to climb. It's just the optics of what our dairy industry look like are changing from a consumer's perspective. But like I said, we're not losing farms per se in Wisconsin. People just decide to discontinue dairying, move the cows to the neighbors, and may use the land for cash cropping. They may turn to beef production or something that's a little less time intensive, like the dairy industry is.
Well, now you have this situation in which milk production needs to slow down to support milk prices, and as a result, it seems like we're poised to see continued culling of herds and a decline in milk output per cow. And when you look at milk output, despite the precipitous decline in the number of farms, the amount of milk being produced continues to increase, as he pointed out, even with fewer farms, which tells me that the technology and animal health continue to be huge drivers. How are farmers seeing innovation change the game?
Wisconsin is really on the cutting edge of a lot of that, Brent, and it's from within our borders. We've got major industry partners here in Wisconsin. Our dairy research center that's connected with our University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. We also, just a little over a year ago, put together a dairy innovation hub, and that is charged with finding the next great opportunity for Wisconsin's dairy industry. Now, we did this probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, where basically the state of Wisconsin said, listen, we love our America's dairy land, we love our dairy farms, we love what it brings to the rural community, but we've got to figure out a way to keep this economically viable. And that's when Wisconsin really pivoted towards specialty cheese production. That has served us very, very well. Now, what the Dairy Innovation Hub is charged with doing is finding that next great innovation that will help Wisconsin's dairy industry and in turn the state. And they're looking at fantastic ideas that I don't think I even ever fathomed. One is pharmaceutical grade use of a lot of dairy products, where a fraction of what's in that gallon of milk will turn into be the monetary reward that really supersedes everything else. That's one aspect. There's all kinds of other, I want to say byproducts, but in turn they could become the main product that the dairy industry could provide. And like I said, they're given a couple $1 million from the state every year to, again, tap into the best minds here in the state of Wisconsin or elsewhere and look at what the next innovation for Wisconsin dairy is going to be. And like I said, Wisconsin's not afraid to invest in its dairy industry because it is a part of our culture. It is how we identify in many regards, and it's where we see our future. And like I mentioned before, it's just a matter of optics to a large extent because our dairy farms, despite the pandemic, still standing on pretty good financial ground as far as their debt load and things like that. And you can't deny that when it comes to looking at the future.
Well, earlier you mentioned farmers not knowing where their milk went when it left the farm, and that fascinated me. You know, when we talked about it last April, and it's still fascinating to me. Have you seen any overtures by the dairy industry there in the state to do a better job of educating farmers or farmers being more active in learning about the process?
You know, I think it gets to be kind of complicated, to be honest with you. It's not an easy answer in all situations. I think it became a very big conversation piece last year when that why am I dumping my milk question got brought up to processors. But, you know, then things start smoothing out. Then you get busy with life and you forget to necessarily go back and start investigating those things. And obviously our dairy processors, they're not necessarily concentrating a lot of time and energy on creating that conversation. I just had a story this week. The U.S. Dairy Innovation Center presented Wisconsin with one of its national awards on sustainability collaboration, which demonstrated that what farmers are doing on their farms with their land relative to conservation and practices in general is a story that our food retailers, our food suppliers, our dairy processors very much want to share with their customers. You know, and they don't want just the happy, happy, joy, joy, joy kind of thing. They want economic data on what these practices really mean as far as sustainability, energy, consumption, carbon footprint, etc. So we just received a national award for the work that's being done on that. So the conversations are happening, maybe not happening as regularly or directly as I think the industry could use. We're also right now, for the first time, to your point about milk price, supply, etc., for the first time that I've witnessed in my pretty long career here in Wisconsin farm broadcasting, I'm seeing the dairy industry open up to conversation about supply management. I won't go so far as to say quota, but you know, something to your point has to shake when it comes to finding a sustainable level of milk prices for everybody, regardless of what you're producing, where it's ending up. So I know in Wisconsin, there's dialogue, there's policy that's been advanced, different legislation that's being worked on and supported. Even right here in Wisconsin, I don't know how far it'll get. They're looking at specific dairy labeling laws that they want to put in place to differentiate dairy from the bovine versus dairy from plant-based sources. So again, we're only one state, but we are definitely engaged in conversations that could ripple beyond our borders and hopefully spark some thoughts on the national scene when it comes to, as you said, supply management and keeping everybody healthy from an economic bottom line.
Well, I tell you what, June is Dairy Month, and one of the most heartwarming things I've seen as we start to emerge from our homes like cicadas is the return of dairy breakfasts across the state of Wisconsin. How exciting has that been to regather in community and share some of that hope and encouragement?
I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that it's been record-breaking. To watch just literally hordes of families come out to these dairy farms. You know, it's not anything fancy, folks. It's a pole shed. It's picnic tables or what have you. It's eggs and sausage and lots of dairy. But it is that sense of reconnecting and feeling, there were a lot of people that did not know where their food came from, had lost touch with where that milk actually is produced. And so they are just reveling in the chance to get out there and see the people behind the scenes that kept them fed during the pandemic. And, I think for all of us, it just feels better to get together physically as opposed to over a screen. So yeah, we've seen tremendous attendance at the events. Some of them have been postponed a little bit into August and even September. But boy, I'll tell you, wherever they're occurring, people are showing up in record numbers.
Well, the Midwest Farm Report is a wealth of information for anyone wanting in-depth coverage of the Wisconsin agricultural scene, and you can keep tabs on the latest news, features, podcasts, and videos at MidwestFarmReport.com. And you can also find them on Facebook, and you can find the fabulous farm babe, Pam Jahnke, on Facebook as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that through the month of June, the Midwest Farm Report has partnered with Gempler's Farm and Home Supply Company of Mount Horeb and Janesville to show support for Wisconsin farmers. If you go to MidwestFarmReport.com, on the right-hand side of the homepage, there's a button for ordering the official Wisconsin Needs Farmers t-shirts. It's a handsome gray t-shirt, and they're $15 each, or free with a $100 purchase at Gempler's through June 30th. You can even order online at Gemplers.com. That's GEMPLERS.com. And Pam, what else do folks need to know about that campaign?
It's kind of the second phase of something we started during the pandemic. I was noticing a lot of yard signs popping up across the state that were saying, we support Wisconsin dairy farmers, we support Wisconsin pork producers. And I mentioned to my management, I don't want to see the industry segmented like that. I want to see all farmers getting the support. So I just kind of kicked out the idea and they ran with it. What we thought initially was going to be 500 yard signs, maybe, turned into over 8,000 yard signs that were physically distributed by my staff across the state of Wisconsin and even to a couple locations just beyond our borders. It was a fantastic campaign that really gave me that deep sense of pride that I know we both have, Brent, when you see people responding to agriculture in need, showing that support of their farmers. It's not something that gets as much attention, I think, as it probably is due. And that was kind of the beginning of the Wisconsin Needs Farmers campaign. And the T-shirt is, shall we say, 2.0. And we don't know where we're going to go with it next. But so far, it's also been well received.
Well, go check that out again, MidwestFarmReport.com. And Pam, happy Dairy Month. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me on Inside Farm Life. And I hope you'll come back soon and share with us more about what's going on in my birthplace, the great state of Wisconsin.
Always my pleasure, Brent. And again, everybody, raise a glass of milk today. Enjoy some cheese for our Wisconsin producers. And remember America's Dairyland.
Absolutely. And we've been chatting with the fabulous farm babe, Pam Jahnke of the Midwest Farm Report. Gateway Seed Company was founded in 1997 on a simple principle. It doesn't start with the seed, it starts with the farmer. We pride ourselves in doing all we can to understand our customers' farming operations. We take the time to listen to their concerns, then focus on providing a solution to address their specific needs. Gateway Seed offers seed corn with trait packages from Bayer and soybeans with trait packages from Bayer, Corteva, and BASF. To learn more about how Gateway Seed can boost your yields and increase your return on investment, visit gatewayseed.com. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, I want to roll out a new segment that you'll hear on here from time to time called Ask the Agronomist, in which we bring in various agronomists to address timely topics. And this week, I wanted to kick things off with Bert Riggan, who's an agronomist for Concept AgriTek. Many parts of the country are dealing with drought stress, while others are simply underwater, and growers are forced to try to figure out how to rebound. And Bert has food for thought for farmers in either camp.
The replanting question always comes down to, I guess you could figure, what stress is involved. The drought stress, replanting always hinges on whether or not it looks like that if your current crop looks like that it is gone, it is, completely gone past the point of recovery. And then whether or not you have sufficient enough rain coming in the forecast to even get a replant established. Down in this part of the world where we're dealing with supersaturation, fields still underwater, all of that, again, you have to take a look and see. One of the biggest things is as the calendar marches on, specifically like on soybeans, even on corn to a certain extent, we're 6 days away from the summer solstice. So any indeterminate soybean, if you're going to replant this late in the season, it needs to be the fullest season soybean you can get your hands on. Otherwise, it won't get the vegetative growth it needs in order to be able to flower and put on enough fruiting sites to do anything for your yield. The fuller season beans will have a better chance of, getting you yield and lapping the middles and therefore, cutting down on weed control and all that. Mm-hmm. Same thing with corn. If you have to replant corn, you don't want to go with an early variety. You want to go with the fullest season you can.
So what kind of talk are you hearing? Are those fullest season seeds even available?
Unfortunately, some of your larger retailers are giving growers incorrect information, telling them they need to go out and plant, like in my part of the world, a 4-1 or a 4-2, which is not what they need. They need a 4-9 to a 5-0 or 5-2. But the reason why they're telling them 4-1, 4-2 is because they're long on those beans and probably don't have any fuller season beans, so they're trying to sell them so they don't have to dump them.
Yeah.
But that could cost somebody 50% of their yield potential by doing that.
So down in your neck of the woods, what are some of the common questions that you're getting from growers right now?
Well, obviously the replant thing is big. Should I? Got guys that, corn crop, ears were underwater. Obviously it's going to be a total loss. Can I come back with beans? And I already put my atrazine out. Questions like that. And it's like, yes, you can come back with beans. You got to do this. I wouldn't worry about the atrazine. You've had water sitting on it for 6 days. It's probably already gone. You're going to scratch the ground to come in and get the field in shape to plant. That should gas off any remaining bit of it, and so you shouldn't have any problem with that. Been getting a bunch of replant questions about whether it's mixing corn and going with beans or mixing cotton and going with beans. It just what options do I have? And that, as far as that goes. The other big thing we've been getting questions on is, trying to salvage. And a lot of these guys still have crops that are in standing water. And some people are telling them they can go and make this application or that application. And from our experience, if the crop's in standing water, you're not going to be successful with foliars. You have to wait till the water gets off the crop. And even if you're dealing in a saturated soil, as long as it's not standing in water, then you do have an opportunity to, salvage the crop. But depending upon the stress, whether it's drought or, saturated soils, kind of depends on what products we would recommend,
Well, and that's kind of a tough deal because everybody's watching the calendar right now, but you really can't afford to get impatient in these situations, can you?
No, you can't, because you can waste an awful lot of money getting impatient. Mm-hmm. Even to the point to where, right now they're saying we could have another tropical system come in. The forecast, the models are saying that anywhere from, us barely getting 1.5 inches to maybe getting 5 to 6 inches of rain, depending upon which track it takes and all that and other, So if it dried up, let's say, if you get back in the field Thursday or Friday, do you really want to plant ahead of that until that forecast is shored up enough so that you feel confident that you're not going to wind up in another flood situation? So, watching the weather is critical in making these decisions as well.
Again, that was Bert Riggan, an agronomist with Concept AgriTek, just one of the many agronomists you're going to be hearing here on our Ask the Agronomist segment. If you have a question you'd like an agronomist to address, send it my way at brent@farmlifemedia.com, and we'll try to tackle it on a future episode. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, is there more upside price potential in corn and spring wheat than soybeans? Jesse Allen is here to get some thoughts on that topic from Mike Zuzolo in this week's Market Talk Update. Jesse.
Well, in the last week or so, we've seen continued volatility throughout this grain market, with updated weather forecasts calling for a cooler and wetter bias for parts of the Corn Belt here as we move into the weekend and move beyond that. And that had an effect on our markets here throughout the week, as we saw a lot of our weather premium taken out of the markets as we headed into this weekend to try and get an idea of where our forecast models are going to go and just how much rain might fall. I talked with Mike Zuzolo on Wednesday's episode of Market Talk here this last week, and we talked about just the demand picture overall. On top of the weather front, there's talk of biofuel blending requirements being relaxed by the EPA, by the Biden administration, and that also had an effect on our grain markets. However, as we looked at things, Mike seems to believe that there's more upside potential in corn and in spring wheat versus soybeans right now, and we talked a little bit about that on the episode. Here's what Mike had to say.
We are set up for a more defensive market heading into the end of the month because of the grain stocks and also because of the acreage report. So both old crop and new crop could be hit by the sentiment of what we're looking forward to the next 15 days. This is where the Federal Reserve policy from just today, as we go on the air on Wednesday afternoon, the Federal Reserve is just now coming out with their new policy, and it is a new policy. They have pulled up their timeline for when they're going to raise interest rates, and they're going to move it into 2023, and it's a firm date now. Well, what's reacted to that is the dollar. The dollar shot up over 1/3%, almost 0.5% gain. We're testing the 100-day moving average as a resistance level. We haven't been up above that level since April or May, if memory serves me right. So this is the other shoe to fall when it comes to the policy side of the equation. So my advice and recommendation to clients and subscribers will be, I'll start with the beans, but I'll quickly move over to the soft red wheat to get some puts bought by the end of this week if I don't see a good weekly export sales number. And I'll probably leave the corn alone for right now, because I actually think that the futures spread in the corn, the July D spread in the corn, getting back towards $1 a bushel, increasing the spread between July and December, is kind of flagging that what USDA said last week about a tighter old crop supply of corn, that's going to come back through, I think, in the grain stocks report. So I'm not as nervous about that. And I also talked to somebody in spring wheat country that is in the know, in my opinion, just today. And she has been doing a lot of talking to farmers in that area. And she's in the media like you. And she said, I've been doing a lot of going on farm tours, talking to producers up in South Dakota, and their crop is done in spring wheat country. That 17% good to excellent in South Dakota means they can't get a crop at this point. So I think the wheat and the corn could actually support one another once we get through the harvest time period. So I feel fairly good about just leaving the corn alone. The futures may go down, but I think the cash price is going to remain fairly solid. I say that watching what the EPA may do. So that's the only caveat I would put on that.
Mike Zuzolo and I also talked about the cattle market and its resurgence of sorts here this last week. And here was Mike's thoughts on the tone of the cattle market right now.
You know, I think the retail sales came in better than I was expecting. The food and beverage side was up about 1% to 2% in May versus April. And that really surprised me. And it was really nice to see, because the featuring report and the activity report that USDA has been putting out every week would lead me to believe that maybe the beef is not getting as good of deal on the retail counter as what the retail sales suggested. So I think that gave us the bounce. We had some Nebraska trade at around 124, real lightly tested, but then we had some negotiated trade that got us into the 123, just under 124 level either, also on Wednesday's early morning report by USDA. So I think your cash and your June futures are very nicely hooked up on the fat cattle side. One other thing that's really benefited the fat cattle has been, as you say, the feeders and the corn, but also the spread unwinding of the long hogs, short cattle. That's not going to last very long, though, I don't think, Jesse. So I'm really eager to get some August hedges in place here for fall cattle needs, and I'll probably do some December hedges even if we can get that December contract up another couple dollars. But my August overvalue for fat cattle is right around 124.25. We may hit that by the end of this week, so I'll probably be getting some hedges in place.
And again, that's Comments with Mike Zuzolo of Global Commodity Analytics, joining me on last Wednesday's episode of Market Talk. You can find the Market Talk podcast on demand anytime, markettalkag.com, and on all your favorite streaming sources, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, and more. This has been the Market Talk update for Inside Farm Life in Nashville. I'm Jesse Allen reporting.
As always, you can find Jesse's daily market updates at markettalkag.com. Again, that's markettalkag.com. And you can find him by searching Market Talk on Facebook. He also appears on the American Ag Network, and you can hear him host Your Ag Today, weekday mornings about 6:50 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM, Satellite Radio, Rural Radio, Channel 147. Next up on Inside Farm Life, how well do you know the springs on your farm equipment? In this week's installment of Bushels and Cents, the hot rod farmer Ray Bohacz puts you in the know.
Welcome to Bushels and Cents from Farm Machinery Digest Radio, heard exclusively on SiriusXM Channel 147 Rural Radio. I am your host, Ray Bohacz, the hot rod farmer. And never forget, it is not what you make, but what you keep that counts. There are many springs found on machinery, and yet most know little about them. There are three basic categories. Compression spring. The load compresses it, such as a valve spring in an engine. Extension spring. This extends and when relaxed, contracts. An example is a throttle spring on an engine or one on a gate or door. Torsional spring. This spring twists, such as on a clothespin or a drive belt tensioner. Spring load is read in pounds of pressure and not per square inch. Agriculture runs on machinery, profits on reliability. Visit farmmachinerydigest.com, where steel and soil meet.
And don't forget, you can check out all of Ray Bohacz's great multimedia content at farmmachinerydigest.com. And if you like what you hear, you can catch him on Farm Machinery Digest Radio on SiriusXM Rural Radio, Channel 147. It airs each Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern and again on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, so I hope you'll go and give him a listen. Well, now that we have the business out of the way, it's time to kick up our heels and delve into a segment that we call Back to the Country, where each week we spotlight country music singers and songwriters making true traditional country music. In a few weeks, when we launch the Inside Farm Life podcast and live streams, we'll also be bringing you in-depth interviews from many of those artists, and we have some great ones lined up, so stay tuned. This week, I want to share with you the very latest release from the pride of Piedmont, Missouri, Jed Melton. He's turning some heads in Nashville with his latest. This is Tonight's on Me on Inside Farm Life.
Well, it seems I've never met a girl like you, who didn't seem to mind if I drink or chew, who's not afraid to shoot a deer, grab a tackle box, crack a cold beer, have mercy on me. Well, she can throw out a line off a creek bank and reel them crappie in. Well, she can hold me tight on a boat ride when it's cold outside. And all these little things that you do make me crazy about you. So just sit back and relax, no need to worry, 'cause tonight's on me. She likes to fill my cooler with Bush Light, and she knows my favorite jeans that fit just right. When she climbs up in my truck, throws the seat back, toes on the dash, I swear, well, heaven's right here. Well, she can throw out a line off a creek bank and reel them crappie in. Well, she can hold me tight on a boat ride when it's cold outside. And all these little things that you do make me crazy about you. So just sit back and relax, no need to worry, 'cause tonight's on me. Yeah, tonight's on me. Whoa. When I look into your eyes, girl, I know we're not wasting time. Well, she can throw out a line off a creek bank and reel them crappie in. Well, she can hold me tight on a boat ride when it's cold outside. And all these little things that you do make me crazy about you. So just sit back and relax. No need to worry, girl. Tonight's on me. Yeah, tonight's on me. Whoa, yeah. It's on me, baby.
That was the Jed Melton Band with Tonight's on Me. You can follow his career by following him on Facebook at Jed Melton Music. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, friends and neighbors. Let's meet up here again next week, shall we? And hey, bring along a friend. You've been listening to Inside Farm Life, a production of Farm Life Media. If you have topic suggestions for future episodes, drop us a line at brent@farmlifemedia.com and be sure to follow the Farm Life page and join the Farm Life group on Facebook.